So there are lots of changes coming into the college football playoff, and obviously there's still a slot for a group of five team, a guaranteed slot for a group of five team to make the college football playoff. And whether that's enough or not, you could probably put up for discussion. But that's the way it's situated right now. And there are people who don't believe that that's good enough, and people who are ready to admit what I think most college football fans already know, and that there's a group of haves and a group of have-nots in the FBS that before, like right now in the 2023 season, there are realistically only a handful of teams that can actually win the national championship. It's the only college sport that exists that way, that you can't, no matter what conference you reside in, no matter how good you are, you don't have a pathway to a championship. Now, you can argue that Cincinnati jumped into the playoff when they weren't in the Power Five. Yeah, because there was a perfect storm of their schedule included playing at Notre Dame, at Indiana, and they went undefeated after having a top 10 team the year before, and other teams crapped the bed, if we're just being completely honest. Nobody in college football, the power brokers at least, the people who legitimately make the decisions, wanted to put Cincinnati in the playoff. They were forced to. And I don't know that Cincinnati got enough credit for competing with Alabama the way that they did. I would venture to tell you that Nick Saban would not tell you that that game was easy by any stretch of the imagination. But I think everybody knows, for the most part, that the group of five teams are firmly behind, as a whole, the Power Five teams. Now, is there a group of five team here or there, or maybe 20% of them that are better than the bottom 20% of Power Five programs? Yes, absolutely 100%. But in the overarching hierarchy of college football, there's the Power Five, now Power Four, and Group of Five. And so Derek Dooley, who used to be the head coach at Tennessee and was head coach at Louisiana Tech before that, has basically started floating out a plan to folks who are like, hey, we should probably just admit that the Group of Five needs its own playoff. And I don't know whether that's a great idea or not, because I think you can look at it two ways. And today I'm going to tell you why I don't think it's a great idea. And tomorrow I'll tell you how I think they should do it. But right now, the Group of Five doesn't have to admit that they are in kind of their own subdivision inside a subdivision, that they are in the FBS. And technically, your offer is on the same level at Kent State as it is at Alabama. Your offer is on the same level at Coastal Carolina as it is at Clemson. Now, they're not recruiting the same kids. And the Power Four programs know that, and the Group of Five programs know that. But when you are trying to get donations from alumni, and you can say, hey, we are competing with the biggest brands in the sport, or when you can look at the schedule and say, we are going to play at this big time state school, or whatever the case may be, it's still an impressive thing to put on the resume. And in the off chance that you get a victory or somebody pulls an upset and you get to thump your chest, and it's remembered as the time that Appalachian State beat Michigan, or Toledo beat Michigan, or Georgia Southern beat Florida, or whatever the case may be, when UL Monroe beat Louisiana. No, when UL Monroe beat LSU. Who was it that was it UL Monroe that beat Alabama maybe in Nick Saban's first year? Like, when you have that, it's a nice spot to be in. And you don't have to turn that down. And the dollar figures for guarantee games for FBS programs is a whole hell of a lot better than an FCS program. You're an FBS program in a MAC, Sun Belt, Mountain West, you can get upwards of $2 million a game from the Oklahomas and Texases and Alabama's, LSU's, Florida, Georgia's, Ohio State, Michigan's for a game. And I know that well, that's how they fund the athletic department, blah, blah, blah. Yes, I get all that. But right now you get to say, hey, we are on that same level playing field. And if we hire the right coach and if we do this, that, the other, we can be in the playoff and we can be playing games in front of 15 million people on TV. And you get to hang a banner that says you made the college football playoff. And that is a really impressive, important thing. One, these don't last forever, but like remember when TCU played in the Rose Bowl when Andy Dalton was the quarterback, and their out-of-state tuition, they're not out-of-state tuition, their out-of-state applications rose 400% that year. Like, you can't discount that. When TCU and Boise State were crashing the New Year's Six, before it was called the New Year's Six, when it was back in the BCS, and there were programs like Utah that was still in the Mountain West at the time, and Hawaii, and TCU, and Boise State, and Western Michigan made New Year's Six games, and Northern Illinois made New Year's Six games. Those things do wonders for those programs. And when you are able to associate yourself with Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Texas, USC, Oklahoma, that's a big deal. When you are viewed as an equal, it's the same reason that some schools that have no business being in conferences like the SEC and the Big Ten competitively, athletically, want to be associated with them athletically. Because at the same time, some of those universities that don't have any business being associated with those other universities academically want to say, yeah, we're in the same conference as Northwestern. Yeah. Vanderbilt. Those are big time schools. Those are very good academic institutions. And so when you can have that association, that's a nice thing to have in your back pocket when you are viewed. And again, I don't know that anybody inherently views Alabama and Troy or Jacksonville State as being on the same level. But in a technicality, they are. And when you can point to that and say, yeah, we are in the same boat as those programs. We are in the same, when Memphis can say we are right there with Tennessee. And the list goes on and on and on of teams in the American and teams in Mountain West, MAC, Sun Belt. When you can say, hey, Conference USA, when you can say Marshall is on the same footing as West Virginia, it's a nice thing to have in your back pocket. And if you say, hey, let's start our own playoff, does that have the same cachet? Does being the national champion of the group of five, does that carry the same weight as being a run-of-the-mill team that didn't make the college football playoff but played in a decently nice bowl game? And you got to hang a banner that says, hey, we played in the Camellia Bowl. I don't know. I know financially it's probably a reason for the group of, or the Power Four schools to say, okay, we got to limit games against a group of five. You can't have 9 conference games and then 3 games against American and Sun Belt teams or MAC and Mountain West teams. You just can't do it. I think that gives them reason and cause to either say, we need to limit how many of those games that there are, or we need to completely cut them off, or we're not going to pay them $1.8 million. We're going to pay them $800,000. And I think that should be maybe the biggest concern for those group of 5 schools, because when you're counting on those other Power 4 schools to give you a big payday every year, you are at the risk of them someday saying, you know what, we're not doing this anymore. I'm not giving you $1.8 million for a game. We'll figure it out between ourselves, and we'll continue to pocket that money and continue to make more money in our TV deals. We're giving you a national platform for you to show up, get your ass kicked, and I'll cut you a nice fat check. But at some point, when people start to get worried about how do I keep more of this money, because that's what it's going to, like, the next logical step is, how do I make more money while keeping more money for myself. Paying Buffalo $1.8 million for a game is going to come up as they're like, well, this is really simple, actually. Why don't we just schedule somebody else in the Power Four? The TV partners love it. It's still probably an opportunity for us to collect a win. Our fan base is more excited and enthused about that rather than a team that they're not necessarily certain if they could find on a map. Why don't we just do that instead? Because I think those days will eventually come, and those smaller schools will be in a world of hurt. So don't bite the hand that feeds you. Maybe don't poke the bear by trying to gain some notoriety for yourself, because for some recruits, there is I can go to this school, Power 4 school, where I can sit and develop for 3 years and maybe get some big NIL or compete to, maybe at some point compete for a conference championship, maybe. Or I can go to this school, the smaller school, where I'm not going to get as much NIL money, but I'm going to play right away, and we can compete for a Group of 5 championship. To some kids, not a sizable portion, but that might be an enticing college experience. If I think I'm not going to go to the NFL, and believe me, there are a bunch of college football players that, like the overwhelming majority, think I'm going to the league. And the ridiculous sheer amount, as evidenced by only 257 of them getting drafted this weekend, shows you that's not necessarily the likeliest of outcomes. So there are some kids who are smart enough to say, I'm a 5'10" wide receiver, or I'm a 6'1" offensive lineman, or something like that, to say, you know what, I'm going to take the playing time at a smaller school with a chance to maybe win a national championship in the Group of 5. You don't want to upset those big schools that then say, you know what, I'm not going to schedule that team, or whatever the case may be. You can't bite the hand that feeds you. And I think trying to start your own college football playoff that's going to take TV money potentially away from the big dogs, or notoriety and attention away from the big dogs, isn't going to go over very well. So I don't know that that's a great idea for the Group of 5 to pursue, business-wise, football-wise, and what we'll talk about tomorrow, why I think it's a good idea, why I think it could be a good idea, or how you could make it a really, really, really good idea and a lucrative idea. We'll chat about that. But I think business-wise and playing it safe might be the best option here. But I won't be surprised if it starts to build a little bit more momentum, because the reality is, while there's one slot available and you've got dozens of schools vying for it, it might not be the best use of a university's athletic department's resources to try to chase that one spot. But there is a way forward, I think. And we'll chat about that tomorrow here on the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing. So if you are watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content that's coming out of Saturday Glory. If you're listening on a podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow here for another episode of the Daily Huddle on Saturday Glory.